ES Audio.
Lawrence, hi, it's Will Macpherson here from the Evening Standard.
Hello, Will, what's up?
Well, I'm writing a feature about great rugby teams, and as you played in more than a couple, I'm thinking the Premiership winning Wasps team of 96 and, of course, England in 2003, to name just two. I thought I'd ask you what it takes to produce a truly great team.
Well, my friend, it takes skill.
Right.
And it takes dedication. You've got to be focused and committed right to the end game.
Yep, putting in the hours.
Precisely, and it takes time. As it happens, Will, these are the same things it takes to brew an outstanding amber ale, like London Pride, sponsor of this very podcast. And more importantly, one of my favourite beers.
I guess it also takes support, especially from the fans. The way they get behind their teams drives those extra yards.
I couldn't agree more, and Fuller's London Pride are showing their support as the official beer partner for Premiership Rugby.
Awesome. You've been a great help, mate. Thank you. And you've also made me strangely thirsty.
Lawrence Dallaglio's Rugby Podcast, supported by Fuller's London Pride, the official beer of Premiership Rugby.
Support with pride, and remember to drink responsibly. Hello, I'm Lawrence Dallaglio. Welcome to my brand new rugby podcast, where my guests and I will be discussing all the action from the weekend. Now, joining me are three stellar guests. First up is the Evening Standard sports correspondent, Will Macpherson. Also, I'm delighted to welcome former international and all-round rugby legend for Wales, the British Lions, Llanelli, Wigan, you name it, he's done it. It is, of course, Scott Quinnell. And last, but by no means least, is the presenter of the Leicester Tigers podcast, Adam Whitty. Adam, nice to see you. Scotty, very, very warm welcome. And Will, great to have you on the show. I'm going to start with Scott because him and I woke up with sore heads yesterday morning and probably feeling a little bit miserable. I turned on the TV, Scott, and Wales were 25-0 down with 15 minutes to go. And I thought my life was couldn't get any worse. And then I watched England lose to Scotland. So I presume you had a similar feeling this weekend.
Yeah, it's been a tough old weekend for a couple of us. Fantastic weekend for Ireland, Scotland, and France. By the way, good to see you all. Seeing you. We haven't caught up for ages, so it's good. Thank you for the invite. Yeah, it's tough weekend. I don't think I got as much of a headache than I would have if it wasn't Ireland away. Because it's a tough place to go. We know it's a tough place to go. It's one of those that I thought Ireland were absolutely outstanding. I don't think they let Wales play at all. We gave away far too many penalties. We made far too many errors. Our line-out wasn't functioning properly. Not too bad at the scrum. And then our ruck and maul really got destroyed by Ireland. But apart from that, brilliant weekend. Absolutely brilliant weekend.
Well, you know what? I'm sure that there were Welsh fans that still found some positives. Will, I'm assuming, although you cover all sports for the Evening Standard, I'm assuming they let you get up to Scotland and cover England. And you were looking for a bit of... I'm beginning to think you're the bad luck omen because you've been in Australia for 2 months following the Ashes. And now you come back to Murrayfield and England lose again.
Yeah, my job is to watch England lose at sport at the moment. I was at wet and windy Murrayfield. Had a lovely weekend despite the weather and the result. But it was a good game and lovely to be back at a heaving Six Nations stadium again after so long.
Well, can I just say, I've got 2 tickets for you for England v Wales.
I'll be there too. Look forward.
Adam, it's great to have you on the show. Normally, when I invite anyone from Leicester, I very rarely get a reply. But listen, we're going to hear about your Leicester official Leicester podcast shortly. But just give us an idea. I mean, clearly, it's been an amazing season for the Tigers. But presumably, you were able to turn that off and watch some international big boys rugby, were you?
Yeah, I did. I was able to. It was a very busy sporting weekend. I watched. I pretty much tuned on actually to the Wales Ireland game at the same time as you, and couldn't believe what I was watching. Saw the Tigers game, and then tuned in to watch England later on. England against Scotland. It was one of those pause jobs, and then try and avoid the result at the best case scenario. It's been a very busy sporting weekend. Like Will, I cover all sports too. The football we won't mention from a Leicester perspective. The rugby was much, much better, pretty comprehensive win. But it was, I think that was the thing for me. What stood out to me was the full crowds. Because the Six Nations is a cultural experience as much as a sporting one too. This tournament offers what pretty much every other sporting tournament of any big sport in this country, in terms of the other countries, all of the home nations being so close together in terms of quality, that seeing the French tricolours waving, the Irish crowds, the Scottish crowd so vocal again was what was really great this weekend, I thought.
And I guess what makes the Six Nations so special is the kind of one-off tribal nature of each fixture. When you only get one chance to beat the side, and you've got to wait a whole year to get your revenge. We'll dive down a bit deeper into the rugby chat. But Scott, as I've got you on, as I said, it's a great pleasure to have you on the show, and I really appreciate you giving up your time. I was looking through all the things you've achieved in your rugby career, and it's been phenomenal, really. 52 caps for Wales, probably would have been a stack load more if you hadn't driven up north and got kidnapped in Wigan. You played 25 of those games in the Six Nations, so no one's better placed to talk about this tournament than you are, scoring 7 tries. But just want to take you back probably to the early 90s when I played against you for the first time. Well, first time I saw you, I never got anywhere close to you, but I definitely saw you on the same field. It was England under-19s against Wales. I was playing number 8. You were playing number 8. I didn't touch the ball. You scored 4 tries, and I think you won by about 40 points or 35 points. And I remember going into the bar afterwards and seeing you in the size of you. You were a man at the age of 18. There's no doubt about it. And your father was even bigger, and your mum were there. And I said to my mum, who travelled all the way out, I said, "Mum, can you go and speak to Mr. and Mrs. Quinnell and ask them what are they feeding their son? Because whatever they're giving him, I need some of that." Because I was tiny. But I'm assuming you remember that game, and I guess the question really was, given your father's sporting pedigree and your family's background, do you think you were always destined to play rugby at the highest level?
I think so, Lol. When you have a look at it, yeah, that was a good time. My mother and father weren't actually going to come to the game. It was one of those. It was funny because in the week they said, "Oh, look, it's a long way to come. We've got work." My dad had work, and then all of a sudden, then on the Saturday morning, they sort of I had there was a text or a phone call sort of say, "We're coming up." I said, "Well, why?" "Oh no, we're coming up. We're coming up." I said, "All right, yeah, fine." So we played the game and everything. I trimmed my beard and did everything for the game, as you said. And then after the game, I was lucky enough to score the 4 tries. I dropped one over the line, if you remember. I actually dropped the ball over that. I don't know how, don't know why. I was actually over the line. The ball sort of came up my hand. And my mother said, "The only reason we came up," she said, "is because I saw a spiritualist come up to me in a week, and she said, Scott's going to have a good game on the weekend. He's going to score 4 tries. And my mother said, "What?" She said, "He's going to score 4 tries. She said, "Are they going to win?" "And they're going to win." "Right, we go up," my parents said. So I blame the fortune teller, right? Because if the fortune teller hadn't foreseen I'd only score 4 tries, I would not have dropped that one over the line. So I blame them. But it's quite like this. Lol, you were the best. You were the best rugby player in your family, right? You were the best number 8 in your family, right?
Yeah, I was the only one.
Well, this is my point. My father went on 3 British Lions tours. My godfather went on 2 British Lions tours. So they both played number 8 for Wales. They both played number 8 for the Lions. My dad, of course, is Derek Quinnell, and my uncle is Merv the Swerve Davis. So I kind of went into the family business.
Yeah, you certainly did. And you certainly did them proud. I remember phoning my dad when I was 16, 17, and I just played my first proper game of rugby at number 8. And I phoned him up from a couple of 100 miles away. And I said to him, "Dad, I'm playing rugby." And he's Italian. He said, "Rugby? What is rugby?" And I said, "Well, to be fair, I'm not quite sure myself. No one passes you the ball. I mean, you don't pass it, certainly not in England anyway." And anyway, he then, when I came home, I went into his office and he had this book, the Laws of Rugby Union, which I thought was quite sweet. He said, "Well, I want to learn the laws because if my son's playing rugby, I need to understand the game." And I said, if I was you, I wouldn't bother reading that because I've played 10 games and there doesn't appear to be any laws whatsoever.
I was about to say, we've never read that one.
Listen, we're going to get into we're going to have a little deep dive into the rugby. You know, as you say, having crowds back in Dublin. I mean, Ireland, let's face it, were favourites for the game, given Wales's problems, Scott, with all the injuries they've had. And the way that Ireland played in the autumn, I thought they were magnificent. I'll be honest with you, I didn't expect Wales to win, but I thought that they might be a bit closer. I mean, you won the championship last year, probably because people underestimated you. You had a lot of very experienced, good players, and you had a wee bit of luck, if I'm honest. But
yeah.
I mean, what was the expectation going into the game, and what's the feeling in Wales, having been pretty much well and truly thumped, really?
Yeah, well, it's difficult, you know. Beating Australia at the end of the autumn, sort of give everybody a bit of lift, and it's one of those games where Ireland away always going to be tough. You know, their game against New Zealand was absolutely outstanding. You know, in the autumn series, we know they're building well. They've got a good coaching system in there. They're coming through. They've got the type of players that can play rugby. You know, you have a look at France yesterday. You've got the likes of, you know, Porter, Keller, Furlong, Byrne and Ryan can all play rugby, you know, so they're not carding anybody in that respect. You know, they're all good ball players. Probably you put Furlong up in you know, if you're gonna play out the back door, he's going to be one of your ball players. You know, he's absolutely outstanding. So if you've got that and you've got good discipline, last year you talked about luck, Wales had to win it. We had red cards and yellow cards, you know, sort of with the opposition last year, where they went down to 14 men. You know, in the Irish game, Peter Romani was sent off early. So yeah, we took our opportunities last year. So this year, you know, we've lost a lot of players through injury, with like Alan Jones, Ken Owen, Falatau has been out, you know, George North's out, Tipperick's out. It could go on, but the one thing, the players have to step up. You know, in a couple of years' time, some of those players, especially after World Cups, a lot of those players, you know, may not play for Wales again. So it's an opportunity for these young guys to step up. Like Tane Basham. I thought Tane Basham was outstanding on the weekend. He carried his form through from the autumn. You know, he was one of the guys that really stood up and went forward at them. But we need more discipline. You know, we can't give that many penalties away. We need a better line-out. When we've got the ball, we need to be more creative with it. You know, you have a look at some of those plays that Ireland played behind with Johnny Sexton. You know, they went left, and all of a sudden it was coming back right. And when it comes back right, nobody can switch off. No defensive side can switch off against them because you don't know where they're going to come from. I think that's what, you know, Wales probably were lacking on the weekend, is the fact that they didn't and weren't competitive enough at the breakdown. Their line speed to shut those plays down wasn't quite good enough, and I thought Johnny Sexton's kicking game was absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, here. And I think what they probably need, it's always tough when you play your first game away from home in the championship, because you're going to be up against it from the start. But I do feel with all the injuries, what they really need, Wales, is to get back to the Principality Stadium and get the 90,000 fans who will get right behind them. And I think that will hopefully lift them in the way that obviously they weren't able to be lifted in Dublin. Will, I'm going to come to you for the game that you and I were both at, the Calcutta Cup match. I mean, it's getting a bit of a familiar pattern for England fans. They lost the opening game last season to Scotland and finished 5th in the championship, the worst championship Six Nations title in I think 16 years. And I think this is the 4th out of 5 games that Eddie Jones has lost to Gregor Townsend. So they've got a bit of a sign over them. I mean, I guess given the conditions, I don't suppose it was a complete surprise that England lost, but I just want to talk to you about your initial thoughts on the game. South Africa, when England beat them with that Marcus Smith kick, there was a sense that we probably won a game that we should have lost. And statistically, as well as Scotland played, and I congratulate them, I think England will have left Murrayfield very frustrated that they didn't take anything away from that game. Yeah,
I think England were in total control of that game after sort of an hour. Then they took Marcus Smith off, which felt like a strange kind of, it felt a bit premeditated to me at the time, and it didn't work. George Ford's obviously an exceptional player with so much experience. of those situations and those conditions, but it did feel a little bit premeditated to me. They then made a series of strange decisions, both on and off the field. Obviously, Cowan Dickey had his yellow card, which was extremely costly, penalty try. Finn Russell cleverly pushed from round the field, and they failed to have a hooker on the field when they had a line out on their own line. And from that, Scotland took the lead, and they never relinquished it. So I think England's leadership, both from a Eddie Jones coaching point of view, but also on field, has come. It's come under fire since the game, and I think their own worst enemies in that final quarter. It was frustrating to watch. Decision making has been an issue for a long time, and it reared its head again.
Yeah, I mean, my view. I mean, Eddie Jones has got this kind of. He's still got the best win ratio of any England coach, and that's something that really upsets Clive Woodward. Was when you ever ask him about Eddie Jones, he definitely sticks to that, doesn't he? Really, but I guess he beat him in the World Cup final in 2003. But, Eddie Jones has taken England to some incredible victories. In fact, probably two of the very best performances under him.
Can I just say, Lol? Can I just say, I think we're about 15 minutes in and you mentioned the World Cup final. So we were having a bet.
Listen, it was a performance which, as I said, Eddie Jones has done some amazing things for England. And you kind of think, right, we're there now. And then, we've had a championship where we finished fifth. And then they've delivered that as their opening performance. And I just feel a little bit frustrated as an England fan because I think he's got a couple of major problems. And I think one of them is trusting players. And the other one is having a consistency in terms of the game plan. Because, you look at Ireland, you look at France, things in rugby don't happen overnight. You can learn defence quite quickly. You can learn set piece and work at it really hard and improve and get better. But the attacking game takes a bit of time and it takes consistency. And if you're constantly changing the players and constantly changing your game plan, I think the players end up quite confused. And that's where I kind of feel that England are at the moment. And don't think we've moved on significantly since the World Cup final, where other teams, I think have. Scotland look a much better prospect than they were 2 years ago, as do Ireland. They've really developed under Andy Farrell. I think France took the brutal option of culling anyone over 30, and it appears to be working. Wales, are in the situation they're in for different reasons. Now, before I go to Adam on the France Italy game, I don't want this pod to be about how badly England played, because it's called the Lawrence Dallaglio podcast. Not be about how well Scotland played, because they were magnificent. And I told every Scotsman that I met, I tried to avoid as many as possible on the final whistle, but I thought they were superb. They looked really organised. They looked sharp as well, really sharp. And tactically, I thought that they didn't do everything that they wanted to do, but they got it spot on. And in Finn Russell, and I thought the Scotland back row, Scott, they probably had the best players on the field.
Yeah, they certainly did. I thought Macpherson was absolutely outstanding. I hope Jim Ritchie's okay. It looked a nasty old injury there, and Hamish Watson's all over the place, and they stopped England playing in the end. I thought their breakdown work was absolutely outstanding. I thought their kick chase was absolutely superb, and you put Duan van der Merwe in that mix as well, and ball carrying, coming off the wing and enjoying it. But you know what? It's Stuart Hogg's kind of infectious in the fact that you see him out there. He's always got a smile on his face. And those new Nashes of his are just even more visible under the lights. You know what I mean? They're just absolutely incredible. They were so good, right, Laura, that they even beat Princess Anne to the trophy. You know what I mean? That's how good Scotland were on the weekend, in fairness to them. They've certainly got a fly half who's willing to challenge his coach, as he did a couple of years ago at half time, and said, we're not going to kick the ball away anymore. Adam, I'm going to come to you, and apologies. I guess I've given you the short straw for turning up last on the pod, really. So I hope you have watched.
Only fair enough.
I hope you have watched France against Italy. But I mean, France being the favourites, Eddie Jones put a bit of pressure on them, saying it's about time they won. And I don't agree with everything he says, but I kind of feel that this is France's year. They've got a magnificent squad. The fixtures are kind of stacked in their favour this year in the Championship, and you feel that they blew it last year against Wales. No disrespect to Wales, I think they blew it the year before against Scotland by the prop Hawass getting himself sent off. So Do you think the French public, given they beat the All Blacks, are expecting a title this year?
I certainly would do. If I was a Frenchman or a Frenchwoman, by the way that they have played, I think they've got, for the neutral, they have that fantastic mix of quality and excitement too. They play such an exciting brand of rugby. I love the way that they play. But I think you saw in that performance against Italy, and of course there's always the slight caveat when they're playing Italy that they've lost, 33 in a row now, 6 Nations matches. But I thought they showed a great intensity. They showed the muscle, the nasty, gnarly stuff as well as part of that performance. The likes of Cameron Woki I thought were fantastic too. I think what would slightly worry me if I was a French supporter would be the opening 20, 30 minutes, where even though I thought Italy were relatively solid and took it to France, the way that they collapsed later on in the game suggested to me that France probably weren't up to it in the early stages. But if they get the bad form out of the way in the opening 20, 30 minutes of the tournament against the worst team and comprehensively beat them after that, then I think they'll be pretty happy.
Yeah, listen, we're going to touch and dig in a bit more detail later on, but I want you all to, pick your outstanding player across the 3 games over the weekend. Now, I'm assuming that that's going to be from the winning team, but you never know. There were some real standout performances. Scott, if I start with you, who was the guy that really stood out for you? Could be a forward, but could be a back, I guess.
Could be. There was a few that stood out, in fairness. I thought Villiers scored 3 tries. I thought he was into everything. He was hitting rucks, he was hitting mauls, he was making his tackles, he was standing. He really showed up, but I thought he was absolutely superb. Played with a smile on his face. The other one, Hansen, coming over from Australia, straight in the corner, all of a sudden, picked in the Irish team, where they've had lots of strength and depth in the back 3. To put him in there against Wales again, he was absolutely outstanding.
You changed. You've been talking about 2 backs at the moment. I mean, we all know that they score the tries, but it's not them. That, we're the ones that win the game. Don't forget that.
All right, well. He's bullying me again. He did this on Lions doors and everything. You know what I mean? No, I picked Matt Ferguson then. Matt Ferguson, I thought was outstanding as a number 8, as a fellow number 8.
That's right. I come to your senses, good man.
I thought he was brilliant, but yeah, I'm going to go for Hansen.
Okay, Hansen. Now listen, I think that's an outstanding choice. Will, interesting to hear your views on the performances, but who really stood out for you across the tournament?
I'm also going to choose a wing. It's not someone I expected to be choosing, actually. I didn't think Scotland-England in the wet was the kind of game that Darcy Graham would have a huge say in, but he was absolutely sensational. He was dangerous with ball in hand. He was round the park. He was everywhere. He was waiting under the ball when Luke Cowan-Dickie slapped it forward. So he would have got a try. Didn't end up on the score sheet. He's got a lovely blend with his opposite winger, Duhan van der Merwe, and he was outstanding. He was also, it was a complete surprise to me to see him turning the ball over to finish the game for Scotland when England were trying to pinch that final score. So yeah, mine's Darcy Graham. He was outstanding.
And I think for me, as I was at that game, I'm going to go with Finn Russell. I thought he was superb. I've always doubted Finn Russell's ability. I mean, he's an absolute genie of a player. No doubt about that. He's got the skills, to do things that other players can't really do. But at international level, sometimes it's about playing the percentages. It's about doing the same things, very, very well. And I just saw his game management. He was desperate to get Scotland moving. He was desperate to, get that back line in the game. But he saw the conditions, and he stuck to he didn't stick to the script, but he played the game superbly well. And the 2 bits of skill ultimately that won Scotland the game, the double crossfield kick that saw for Luke Cowan-Dickie, and then the diagonal game management that he showed to force Joe Marler to throw in. So I think, and I don't mind a little story of redemption myself either, really. So having been omitted from last year's championship for having 2 beers, I mean, how the game's changed, eh? He came back and I thought he produced the man of the match performance, really. So Finn Russell. Adam, for you, the outstanding player? I'm assuming it might be a Leicester Tigers player, but there were some others in the tournament.
Yes, it's an ex-Leicester's player, actually, and story of redemption possibly was the phrase you used at the end there. I'd possibly go for the same. Mine, maybe I would say Villiers had a better overall performance for France, but I'm going to go for what I thought was a lovely story, which was Ben White, who scored the first try for Scotland in that game on Saturday night. He was at one stage the heir to Ben Young's throne at scrum half at Tigers. He was going to come in and he was going to be the man that once Young's retired or moved elsewhere, he was going to take over. That was when Tigers were struggling. But then they brought in Richard Wigglesworth, Jack Van Portfleet, who is a name that rugby fans and international fans, I think, will get used to in the coming years. He's a real talent. Came of age too through the academy, and he was surplus to requirements and was let go essentially by Tigers. He joined London Irish, which is a good move for him. And I wasn't aware of his Scottish roots, I have to say, but he was part of the squad named a couple of weeks ago, which was a nice surprise. He's done well down at Irish. I thought he took his try very, very well, having just come on. Again, I'm not 100% sure if this is accurate, but as he came on as a concussion replacement, I think had he not come back on, his stats would have read 0 appearances, 1 try, which would have been a fantastic place in the record books, it was his weekend. I think Stuart Hogg passed him the Calcutta Cup and he lifted it, I think, rather than Hogg himself. So it was Ben White's weekend. So he's my outstanding player, I think.
Yeah, Hoggy only gave it to him because he saw Prince's hand coming down to get it back. It's a new kid. He didn't know what he's doing.
The Six Nations always dominates the rugby news, but Will, just you're across most of the leading headlines, I'm assuming, being the leading sports journalist. What's the latest rugby news? I saw Phil Davis has been appointed as Director of Rugby for World Rugby, a great appointment for World Rugby, and we wish him all the very best. Any other news? No sightings, I wouldn't imagine, from the weekend, were there?
Well, there's no sightings from this weekend. I think in England and possibly Wales as well, there's going to be a lot of talk about when players are coming back from injury. I don't think England extended their injury list at the weekend. Eddie Jones will update his squad on Tuesday. One of the things that's quite nice now about the expanded Premiership is that obviously it's running alongside the Six Nations. So players are able to kind of show some form. They're able to come back from injury and get some serious game time. We've seen, England have got a long injury list, and there's a couple of guys who are on the way back. We saw Joe Launchbury this weekend play well again in a very good Wasps performance. We also Alfie Barbary and Paolo Adogwu caught my eye from that game in that stunning comeback against Exeter. So it'll be interesting to see if any of them get a game in the next few weeks. But Courtney Laws is on his way back from a head injury. I don't know whether Italy might be a bit soon, but that Wales game in a fortnight, he'll be looking at that. And so will Manu Tuolangi as well, who put in an all-action cameo on Sunday at Quins.
I did chat to Alex Sarnason, the Director of Rugby at Sale, and I'm pretty sure that he's deleted Eddie Jones's phone number from his mobile because every time he phones him, he gives him back to England, then he comes back injured again. So I think he's had enough of that. But listen, we wish Manu Tuolangi well, and we all know that what a game breaker he can be. Let's turn our focus back to the Premiership again. Adam, you're the host of the most listened to rugby podcast, I believe, in the country. It is, of course, the Leicester Tigers podcast. You've been presenting it for the last 3 years. I'm not sure you were necessarily brought up or born into rugby, but you've obviously adopted it very well. Give us a little insight into that and what you do. And more importantly, how do you manage to get any words of sense out of Steve Borthwick in a post-match interview?
Yeah, yes, that is the real challenge. I'll come to that in a moment. I've spoken to Steve today, and it was an archetypal Steve press conference, unfortunately, where it was very difficult to get a lot out of him. Yeah, you're right. It was always football and cricket for me with my family. We weren't a rugby family, but when I came up to Radio Leicester, they told me I was doing the Tigers, and I have to say, learning rugby has been the pleasure of my professional career so far. I absolutely love the game. I love everything about it. I've loved learning about Tigers fully, understanding the game a little bit more too. It's been an absolute joy, and the podcast is a real success. What I love about Leicester is that it is such a great sporting city, and the fans in the area, because you've got one big football team, you've got one big rugby team, and the people of the area can support both, and often do. And so there's a real passion. You walk into the centre of Leicester, you will see a Tigers shirt, you will see a City shirt as well when you're walking around. It's an absolutely fantastic place, hugely passionate fans. I think Tigers fans, along maybe with Gloucester, maybe Bath as well, are the fans that get closest in terms of rugby teams to what we might class as that real tribal element. They're hugely knowledgeable. They get them down in huge numbers. 26,000 down at Welford Road is an extraordinary turnout pretty much every week as well. And it's just been such a great club to follow. And we followed the Downs. I mean, when I started, pretty much when they were just about falling into their lowest ebb, they would have been relegated if it wasn't for I almost called them Saracens then. Saracens' financial indiscretions.
You do the headlines as well, do you?
I'm wasted at the BBC, and I should be. It should be more of the tabloid stuff. If it wasn't for that, they would have been relegated. And I think that's been the interesting thing, explaining to my friends. This wasn't Manchester. Let's say this isn't Manchester United, where they are now 7th, 8th in the table of the Premier League. This is Manchester United 17th, 18th in the Premier League. And that was why it was such a huge story. And now we're seeing them rise from the ashes again. It's been a real joy. Going back to Steve Borthwick, actually, I remember it's very interesting. I mean, I'd be interested to know what you both think about this, really. I think he is the favourite to take over from Eddie Jones at the end of the next World Cup, if that is indeed when Eddie Jones turns around, decides to step down, I should say. Particularly if he's holding a Premiership trophy above his head either this June or next June. I think he's a dead cert if that's the case, considering the job he will have done at Tigers. But you're right, getting a lot out of him, getting him to express himself, talk about things beyond. I mean, we always laugh about the fact that he always talks about the next game, that he doesn't particularly open up on a lot of things. He doesn't tell us, for example, if players are injured. And I think even
though we know that they are.
Well, exactly. Yes, they get stretched off the field and he won't tell us whether they're injured or not. The media side of things is going to be very interesting. He is better than he was in terms of opening up. But I think he's got to, in my personal view, got to improve on that element of it. In trying to do it, we have a good relationship with Steve, but it's all about, mixing it up, being a little bit firm with Steve when you need to, when he's not answering the questions. I'll be honest, sometimes I downright flirt with him, to be honest, to see if I can get anything out of him.
Hey, stop doing those eyes to Lawrence.
You can see straight through it. It's because he's got the same hairstyle as me. That's what does it.
I tell you what, when I played against Steve Borthwick, I don't think he ever lost a line out. And when he was England forwards coach, I don't think England ever lost a line out. And how much they could have done with him up at Murrayfield, because most teams have about sort of 30 or 40 line out calls, but I think Steve had about 200. You know what I mean? He is just absolutely passionate. I do think he'll be in the mix. I mean, we're not going to talk about who's going to replace Eddie Jones too much, but if I was Conor O'Shea, who will be in charge, I'd be sounding out Andy Farrell when he finishes the World Cup, and I'll be bringing him back to England. I'd also go and grab Sean Edwards, pack his bags for him down in Perpignan, and bring him back to England, because he's been twice. They've not offered him that job, and he's desperate to coach England at some stage. And why not? The likes of Stuart Lancaster and Steve Borthwick. I don't think international rugby is a one-man job anymore. If you look at New Zealand, every time they look up in the box, you've got Steve Hansen. Well, you had him. You had Ian Forster, and then you had Wayne Smith. Now, the rugby IP within that group is phenomenal. You don't just appoint one person. So, I think England would do well. And just another stat: no World Cup's been won by a country coached by someone not from that country. So, I genuinely believe that you need to understand the DNA of the individuals involved to get the best out of them. So we'll look forward to that. But Eddie Jones is the man in charge for now. Now, listen, we always like to do a few different things, and we've got a little competition called Over the Line or In the Bin. Now, Scott and I spent more time. Well, I certainly spent more time in the bin than I did over the line. Scott probably scored a few more tries, but we're going to pass you over to Will, who I believe has got the rugby trivia questions.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Lawrence. As you say, this is our new quiz to test all your trivia knowledge. It's a very, very simple game, this, and there's only one round. I'm going to make a statement, and you just have to tell me if you think it's true. So over the line, or if you think it's false, in which case it's in the bin. There's no prize. You're just playing for pride, guys. So my question is, the Calcutta Cup, which of course is awarded to the winning team in the Scotland-England game each year, is made from 270 melted down silver rupees. Is that over the line or is it in the bin? I'll go to you first, Scotty.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. It's going to be. I've never picked it up, but it looks heavy.
Lawrence, have you picked it up?
I have picked it up, and yeah, it's the oldest fixture in the international calendar. I don't know exactly how old it is. I probably should, but I've chosen to forget it now. It's Monday, but you've just reminded me of it. But I mean, I'm thinking as it's the oldest fixture, and as England thought that they had some right to dominate and overtake the world, I'm assuming it was when they spent time in India, and it was made from rupees. So I'll go over the line.
Adam, are you going to stick with the party line?
I think so, considering I didn't actually until this year. It was Saturday night when I checked out what the story was. I'd never looked it up before, based on the fact that it came from the Calcutta Rugby Club and the way that it's all started. I would say that probably makes about sense. I would happily take that 270 rupees, probably more than my BBC salary, I'd suggest.
You think Dean Richards...
Before you give us the answer, I think this is a very insensitive quiz because, right, I got sent off playing for Llanelli against Wasps, right? And Lol scored many tries against me, right? And I got sent off, right? And this is true, right? I actually got sent off for a high late tackle on one Lawrence Dallaglio, right? And Jeff, generally, the referee, so I got there, he had a little kick of the ball, didn't he? He decided, right? He decided he was going to have a little kick. So he had a little kick. I was charging him down, and my elbows accidentally caught the top of his head, right? And as he caught the top of his head, and the ball had landed at this stage, I've got to say, right? And he fell on the floor, and the referee calls me over, and he shows me the straight red card. And I thought, I cannot believe this. I cannot believe it. I turned around, right? And as Lawrence is on the floor going, oh, right, I walk over him. And as I walk over him, he winks at me. He winked at me, right? So that I got sent off. So this is a very insensitive quiz. But in fairness, Lol, you wrote me a lovely letter a couple of weeks later that allowed me to play against South Africa. So exactly. It was very kind of you. Thank you very much.
I don't know why the discipline. It wasn't supposed to go to the disciplinary officer, but somehow he found it. Yeah. Anyway. Well done. I do remember that, actually. Thank you.
The good news is you are all right. Insensitive or not, you are correct. It is over the line. And Adam seems to know quite a lot about this, actually. I'm very impressed. When the Calcutta Rugby Football Club was disbanded in 1878, members decided to keep the memory of the club alive by having the remaining 270 silver rupees in their bank account melted down to be made into a trophy. And they gifted it to the RFU. And
I'm pretty sure that Finlay Calder, John Jeffrey and Dean Richards didn't really appreciate that when they were booting it down Princes Street after a night out. Now, we've just got time to look ahead, really, to the second round, which comes on straight away. You know, back-to-back games in the Six Nations. Scott, Wales back at home in Cardiff against a kind of resurgent Scotland. I mean, it's not going to be easy, but they'll be delighted that they're back home again.
Yeah, they'd be delighted they're back home. Of course, in front of a crowd for the Six Nations made a huge difference in the autumn series, and I think it'll play a huge part.
Who's the key player? Who's the key? I mean, is it Dan Biggar? He's captain this year. Is he going to be the key player to lift Wales' his performance, Scott, or do you think there'll be you look at Tane Basham or someone else to be a hero? Because Dan Biggar's been magnificent over the last few years, hasn't he?
Dan Biggar is absolutely outstanding. He's the type of guy that'll come back to Cardiff. He'd be hurting, captain for the tournament. He'll be hurting from last week, and the players will be hurting for him as well because he's a hugely respected man within that squad. I think as well, you talked about people maybe coming in. We need the physicality of Moriarty. I think from the off. And you talked about England, who's coming back. I'd love to see him. I'm not sure how far away he is, but, Talupe Faletau.
Yeah.
We just need some ball carriers that can run a little bit wider, can get over England, that can release us from those areas. I wouldn't make that many changes.
Yeah.
Because, you've got to believe in the side. If they've gone to Ireland, they've got to back that up. So maybe 1 or 2 changes, no more than that, and they've got to win this game because they don't want to go to Twickenham, having lost to Scotland, having lost to Ireland, and then having France at home the following week. So this is a big, big game for Wales. It's a must-win game for Wales. And Scotland will be coming down here, with their tails wagging.
Yeah.
They will love the fact that they come into the Principality Stadium, full crowd, and with that biggest smile you've ever seen on their face, playing the type of rugby that they are playing. Yeah. So for me, come on, Wales win.
Good man. Adam, I'm going to come to you with the kind of tie of round 2, really. The 2 favourites for the tournament, both unbeaten after 1 game. France, pretty impressive given the rain in Paris, and Ireland, probably the performance of round 1. Ireland have been to France and won, I think 2018 when they won the Grand Slam. So they've been there and done it before. How do you see this one going?
I think this is possibly too close to call, certainly on the balance of the way that the 2 teams are playing. I think we saw from those 2 the most complete performances this weekend. And I think their form has been sustained, both Ireland and France, for the past 6 months in terms of the quality and consistency of the way that they're playing and the style in which they play as well. I think it's set to be a classic. I think it will be a really exciting encounter. Both teams will really go for it. And the only thing that I think will separate the 2 teams is the fact that it will be in the Stade de France, the tricolores flying, that great atmosphere in there. I think that will make all the difference, to be honest. But I think it certainly wouldn't surprise me if Ireland go there and win. But I think France just have the edge simply because it's on their own home turf.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you, Will. I know you need to get away. I'm taking my wife, Mrs. Dallaglio, away for Valentine's weekend. Somehow there happens to be a game of rugby being played in Rome this weekend. I'll end up at the stadium, and she'll probably end up at Gucci or something like that. So it's going to cost me an absolute fortune.
I'm not being funny. I reckon it'll be the other way around.
Will, I mean, it's a game that England probably need right now. They'll be hurting. They got to put their house in order. They'd have done their review and thought 67% possession, a load of territory. How did we not do more with the ball in hand? And it's just the time to reset for England, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the perfect fixture for them after the defeat at Murrayfield. They kind of there's so much expectation around England anyway, but fans just see the Italy game as they've never lost it, have they? They don't know. They're the only team who don't know how that feels at the moment. I doubt Eddie Jones will change too much this week. I think it's a pretty scratch team anyway that he's thrown together for that Scotland game. So I think he needs to stick with it. As we mentioned before, there might be a couple of guys coming back from injury. He might look to get a bit more clout in that back line. I don't know, maybe Mark Atkinson, Ollie Hassel-Collins would be a possibility as well. But I expect it'll be a similar side, and he'll be relying on them to build and build and build. I think the game after those 2 fixtures on Saturday, which are just absolutely mouth-watering, I think England-Italy might be a little bit after the Lord Mayor's show, but that's fine. Eddie Jones won't mind as long as they come back with 5 points.
Right, well, Scott's gone for a Wales win, just. Adam said France, but too tight to call. I'm assuming, what are you, a pasta or a bolognese or a carbonara? What are you going for?
Yeah, I think England fans travelling over their lovely weekend in Rome will come back happy, I suspect. Both from a food and drink.
I think they may have garlic bread to go with it as well.
I'll go and tell Mrs. Dallaglio. She'll be delighted. Listen, that's all for the first episode of Lawrence Dallaglio's Rugby Podcast. It just remains for me to say an enormous thank you to my guest, Scott Quinnell. Scotty, been brilliant. Adam Whitty, good luck with your podcast. I'd be delighted to be your guest with Martin Johnson at some point. And Will,
we'd love to have you.
We look forward to seeing you in Rome. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.